Hello everyone. Now we will see the notes of Ode to a Nightingale, written by John Keats. If you did not subscribe my channel, please subscribe for more videos. John Keats was an English poet of the second generation of Romantic poets, along with Lord Byron and Percy Bysshe Shelley. P.B. Shelley. His poems had been in publication for less than 4 years when he died of tuberculosis at the age of 25. They were differently received in his lifetime, but his fame grew rapidly after his death. By the end of the century, he was placed in the canon of English literature, strongly influencing many writers of the pre Raphaelite Brotherhood. The Encyclopedia Britannica of 1888 called one ode one of the final masterpieces. George Louis Borges named his first reading Keats an experience he felt all his life. Keats had a style heavily loaded with sensuality, notably in the series of odes. Typically, all the romantics he accentuated extreme emotion through natural imagery. Today, his poems and letters remain among the most popular and analyzed in English literature. In particularly, Ode to a Nightingale, Ode to the Grecian Urn, Sleep and Poetry, and Sonnet on First Looking into Chapman's Honor. Keats devoted more and more time to study of literature, experimenting with verse forms, particularly the sonnet. He began Calidore and initiated an era of great letter writing. On returning to London, he took lodging at 8 Dean Street, Southwark, and braced himself to study forefather for membership of the Royal College of Surgeons. When Keats died at 25, he had been writing poetry seriously for only about 6 years from 1814 until the summer of 1820, and published for only 4 the compression of his poetic remarkable aspect of Keats' work. Ode to a Nightingale. Ode to a Nightingale was written in 1819 and it is the longest one with 8 stanzas of 10 lines each. It was written at Charles Brown's house after John Keats was struck by the melancholy singing in a nightingale bird, and it travels through the cable of the Greek gods, all the while emphasizing the feeling of melancholy, are tragic and often by Greek emotion, that Keats would have no doubt learned through his readings. Unhappy poem. The poem itself very unhappy. Keats is stunned at the happiness of the bird and despairs at the difference between it and its happiness and his own unhappy life. At the start of Ode to the Nightingale, the heavy sense of melancholy, and Keats, despite the death imagery, does not really want to die. A mixture of pain. The complicated nature of human life, a mixture of pain, joy, emotion, numbness, the actual, the ideal, etc., dominates the poem, so much so that even at the end it is unclear whether or not it happened. Do I wake or dream? It can also be assumed that the heavy imagery of death and sickness could hark back to his experiences taking care of his elder brother who died of tuberculosis under John Keats' care. The unhappiness, however, that Keats feels in the poem is not necessarily measurable. Keats writes that he has been half in love with easeful death and describes the joy of listening to the nightingale's song in a sort of Arophia. It can therefore be considered that Keats would rather forget his unhappiness than die. The references to Hamlock and Leith Keats to forget. Ode to a Nightingale is a personal poem which describes Keats' journey into the state of negative capability. The tone of the poem rejects the optimistic pursuit of pleasure found within Keats' earlier poems and instead explores the theme of nature, transience, and morality, the latter being particularly relevant to Keats. The Nightingale describes experiences a type of death but does not actually die. Instead, the songbird is capable of living through its songs, which is a fate that humorous cannot expect. The poem ends with an acceptance that pleasure cannot last and that death is an inevitable part of life. In the poem, Keats imagines the loss of physical world and sees himself dead as a sword over the which Nightingale sings. The contrast between the immortal Nightingale and the Mortal Man. Structure. Ode to a Nightingale was probably the first of the middle set of four odes that Keats wrote following Ode to Psyche. According to Brown, this is further evidenced by the poem structure. Keats experimentally combines two different types of lyrical poetry, the odal hymn and the lyrical of questioning voice that responds to the odal hymn. This combination of structure is similar to that in the Ode on a Grecian Urn. In both poems, the dual form creates a dramatic element within the text. The stanza form of poem is a combination of elements from Petrarchan sonnet and Shakespearean sonnet. Keats incorporates a pattern of alternating historical shorts and long vowel sounds in his ode. In particularly, line 18 has a historical pattern. Short and long vowel sounds. Keats incorporates a pattern of alternating historically short and long vowel sounds in his ode. In particularly, line 18 has a historical pattern of short followed by long followed by short and followed by long. This alternation is continued in longer lines, including line 31, which contains 5 pair of alternations. However, other lines such as line 3 really on a pattern of 5 short vowels followed by long and short vowel pairing until they end with a long vowel. These are not the only combination pattern present, and there are pattern of 2 short vowel followed by a long vowel in other lines, including 12, 22 and 59, which are repeated twice, and then long vowel pairs. This relevance on vowel sounds is not unique in this ode, but is a common to odes other 1819 odes to his Eye of Saint Agnes. Reliance on assonance. The poem incorporates a complex reliance on assonance, the petition of vowel sounds in a conscious pattern as found in many of his poems, such as reliance of assonance is found in very few English poems. Within Ode to a Nightingale, an example of this pattern can be found line 35, where the E of already connects with the sound E of tender and the I of with connects with the I is. With same pattern is found again in line 41 with the A of cannot linking with the A of et and E of C linking with the E of feet. This system of assonance can be found in approximately the tenth of the lines of Keats' later poetry. Masculine pause. When it comes to other sound patterns, Keats relies on double or triple cases in approximately 6% of lines throughout the 1819 odes. An example from Ode to a Nightingale can be found within line 45, as a pause after the commas are a masculine pause. Furthermore, Keats began to reduce the amount of Latin-based words and syntax that he relied on his poetry, which in turn shortened the length of the words that dominate the poem. There is also an emphasis on words beginning with consonants, especially those that begin with B, P, or V. The first stanza relies heavily on these 3 consonants, and they are used as a signal to add a musical tone within a poem compared to his earlier verse. Spondices are relatively abundant in his 1819 odes and other late poems. Themes in Ode to Nightingale. Ode to a Nightingale describes a series of conflicts between reality and the romantic idea of uniting with nature. In the words of Richard Fogley, the principal stresses of the poem is struggle between ideal and actual, inclusive terms which, however, contain more particular authentics of pleasure and pain, of imagination and common sense reason, of fulfulness and privation, of permanence and change, of nature and the human, of art and life, freedom and bondage, waking and dream. Of course, the Nightingale's song is a dominant image and dominant voice within the ode. The Nightingale is also a object of empathy and praise within the poem. However, the Nightingale and the discussion of the Nightingale is not simple about the bird or the song, but about human experiences in general. This is not to say that the song is a simple metaphor, but it is a complex image that is formed through the interaction of the conflicting voices of praise and questioning. On this theme, David Franklin summarizes the way Ode to a Nightingale and Ode to a Grecian Urn performs this when he says we are dealing with the talent indeed in the entire approach to poetry, in which symbol, however necessary, may possible, not satisfying as the principal concern of poetry any more than it could be with the, Shakespeare, but is rather an element in the poetry and drama of human relations. However, there is a difference between an urn and a nightingale in that the nightingale is not an eternal entity. Furthermore, in creating an aspect of the nightingale for immortal during the poem, the narrator separates any union that he can have with the nightingale. The nightingale's song within the poem is connected with the art of music in a way that the Erne Ode on a Grecian urn is connected to the art of sculpture. As such, as Nightingale would represent an existing presence, and unlike the urn, is directly connected to the nature. As natural music, the song is for beauty and lacks of message of truth. Keats follows Coleridge's belief as found in the Nightingale in separating from the world by losing himself in the bird's song, although Keats favor a female nightingale. A female nightingale over Coleridge's masculine bird, both reject the traditional deception of the nightingale as related to the tragedy of Philomena. Their songbird is a happy nightingale that lacks of melancholy. Feel the pressure, previous poetic deception. The bird is only a voice within the poem, but it is a voice that compels the narrator to join within and forget the sorrow of the world. However, there is a tension in that the narrator holds Keats guilty regarding the death of Tom Keats, his brother. The song's conclusion represents the result of trying to escape into the realm of fancy, like Percy P.B. Shelley to a skylark. Keats' narrator listens to a bird song, but listening to the song within, Ode to a Nightingale. Painful and similar to death. Ode to a Nightingale is almost painful and similar to death. The narrator seeks to be with the nightingale and abundance his sense of vision in order to embrace the sound in an attempt to share in the darkness with the bird. As the poem ends, the trace caused by the nightingale is broken, and the narrator is felt wondering if it was a real vision or just a dream. The poem's realism on the process of sleeping is common to Keats' poem, and Ode to a Nightingale shares many of the same themes as Keats' sleep and poetry. And Eve of the Saint Agnes, his further separate the image of the nightingale's song from his closest comparative image, the urn. Ode to a Nightingale has long-standing literary association, but Keats famously Ode was inspired by the real-life nightingale as much as by previous poetry. Stephen Harburn consider how Keats uses the bird to position poetic imagination between the mortal and the immortal. Ode to a Nightingale is one of the 5 great odes John Keats composed in the summer and autumn of 1819. It was about a semi-rural Hampstead. He had fallen in love with his neighbor Fanny Brown and was enjoying a period of faithful and confident composition who have been delegated by the Nightingale's song. If you like the video, if it is useful for you, please subscribe my channel for more videos like this. Thank you.